Good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy Skalicki, your host for this morning's episode of Getting to the Point. And our guest today is John Garvey of Garvington Creative. Welcome, John. Good morning. How are you doing today?
Good, Cindy. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to see you. Great to have you here. I'm excited for our conversation today. We are recording this session and we're also inviting folks to join us live, and we're going to have a little bit of time, I'm hopeful, at the end for participants who want to show any questions that they've got or voice their questions. So we'll kind of reserve a little bit of that at the end. But why don't we get started just by a little introduction. I just wanted to share with everyone here, John and I have known each other probably 3 or so years and met early on at 1 Million Cups. We saw each other a lot at those meetings, which are held in cities all over the United States, and we have one here in Fort Collins. John is a great storyteller, and he does a lot with story and marketing and branding. So we hit it off great when we first met. And I did a little work with John prior to a Fort Collins Startup Week. He was giving a talk and we did a little bit of rehearsing. You remember that, John, at the Old Town Library together? So John, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done in your career so far and what prompted you to start Garvington.
Sure. It stems back to, I was a freelance writer for a period of time. Writing's always been one of the cornerstones of my sanity. I've always had this nerdy side. I'm always excited about a book that I'm reading, and I've always used writing as a way of working through my ideas and expressing myself. So from that, I was a freelance writer for a while and decided that I wanted to actually make money, and also that there's this, there's a creative element to it and there's an analytical element to it, and I wanted to nurture both of them. So I got into marketing advising and consulting and strategy, and as well as copywriting. So what I do at Garvington Creative is I help busy entrepreneurs and managers elevate their marketing so they can successfully grow their business. I write websites, blogs, and I help people tell their stories in a way that connects to their audience.
And I've read a lot of the things you've written. You're a really great writer, and writing is one of those skill sets that a lot of people struggle with, or maybe it doesn't come easily until you've really put some time and effort into it, kind of like public speaking, actually, right?
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So you work largely with entrepreneurs and business owners who are working to kind of clarify their messaging. So when someone comes to you, John, and they say, geez, John, I've got this issue with my business that I'm not sure how to handle. What are they saying to you when they are the right client? Talk to me a little about that. What's the
Allow
problem
me
they're
to answer
having?
that. What's that?
What's the problem they are having in their business that you're solving?
They're confusing people, and they're not connecting with their clients or customers. They're not connecting to the right kind of clients, the kind of clients that get them out of bed in the morning, that they're excited to go to work for. So the problem is that it's hard to describe what you do succinctly and in language that your audience grasps. And a lot of times you have very little time to convey what you do and why a person should care, because we all have a lot on our plates. So we get so close to our work, this is true of just about everybody, you get so close to your work that you forget what's jargon and what's not jargon. And it can make you sound pretentious, not necessarily, but it's certainly confusing. So
Perfect. So you help
getting like a 70 word or 170 word like mission statement or whatever down to 20 words of crystal clear, enticing text.
Yep, exactly. Because I think a lot of times people want to show how much they know, and therefore you have 70 words in your mission statement. But in reality, you have to think about that audience piece and what they're getting from that 70 words. It might look smart and sound smart, but that's not speaking to them at the place they're at. And that can be a big hurdle. And so we've got editing that I'm sure you help provide, also writing and storytelling, right? So, well, in these episodes, John, we try to hit on 3 pieces that you can share to help people. And I know that you brought a couple of slides, which is a first for our episodes here, but I think they're great. And I'd love for you to share your screen and we can kind of talk through the 3 points. And I know you're going to hit on how to stay memorable, right, with your audience, how to stay memorable. And then I love the part about how do you infuse some humor, even if you have a really techie side, how can you kind of infuse humor as a way to be memorable as well, right? So go ahead and share your screen and tell us about that first point that you have in your deck.
Okay, so the overarching, let me make sure. All right, so a lot of what I do, the premise of it is it's easy to sound credible. You never forget that you're supposed to sound credible. But it's more challenging to sound memorable and to really connect with people. Especially in business, you never forget that you're supposed to sound like you know what you're doing. But packaging an idea in a way that people will actually remember you 3 minutes or 3 days after your conversation is a different thing. And it's not about credibility. So there's lots of ways to manage this. Cindy, you and I are both storytelling nerds. And
yes.
very much appreciate the power of a well-told story. But I'm kind of zooming in on 3 more specific tactics that are often elements of storytelling.
So John, we had about 3 people that just joined us. So I just want to quick set the stage. I want to welcome those of you that just popped in. John Garvey's going to share a few slides with us here to hit on the 3 points that he's
Stop.
help us.
This is Daddy's important work thing. Okay.
Grab button real quick. Perfect.
All right.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, so one of the challenges is that to you, everything about your business is interesting. And the tendency is to want to, therefore, to talk about all aspects of your business. But that's not the case with your customers. And even to the extent that they may be interested, if you're just connecting with them for the first time, you really, really need to distill it down and separate what is essential from what's merely interesting. And one thing to keep in mind is the way that working memory functions. Working memory is short-term memory. It's the number of things that we can keep track of in any given moment. And the most widely cited research on working memory was by Harvard psychologist, George Miller. And the rule is the 7 plus or minus 2 rule. So people on average can keep track of 7 things at a time. Some people it's 9, some people it's 5. And so when you encounter somebody, when you're talking to someone, they're probably already thinking of 3 or 4 things. They're thinking of their kids' test scores. They're thinking of an email that they need to send. Mm-hmm. They are anticipating, meeting a friend after work for drinks or whatever. And they're ruminating on a conversation they had yesterday. So it's like, if there's 7 or more conservatively, like 5 things that they can keep track of, and you tell them like 8 things about your business, just think about it as walking up to someone who's already juggling 4 beanbags and trying to toss them 8 more bean bags, they're not going to pick out the most important one. They're going to drop them all. So that's the analogy that I like to use.
That's a good one. I was thinking in my mind of when you said 7 things, I was thinking, contextualizing that. I've also heard, you can only do or accomplish about 6 things a day. If you make a list, the magic number I've read is 6. If you can accomplish, any number of things in a day, you should write 6 things that you can do, and that's the manageable number. But I love that you're including things about what people are already thinking about. And I use that a lot in the speaking coaching that I provide. It's so hard to remember as a speaker that the people you are speaking to are not blank slates. They're thinking about the fact that their stomach hurts or their mom's diagnosis from something is coming in the next couple of hours from a doctor. Or, you're right. People have so much to keep track of, and those bean bags can become overwhelming. So that's perfect. Okay, now what's next?
So I'll just expand on that very briefly.
Sure.
The way that we handle, you might get a little bit of pushback when you talk about this, but the way that we handle information is by chunking it. So like the reason that you remember an area code as like 720 as one piece of information instead of 3 discrete pieces of information is because of that. And if you can do that, there are ways that you can do that to convey more to people. So, but you want to first really distill things down into 1 or 2 or maybe 3 key things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can build on that. And that's a whole different tangent that I'm not going to go on.
Okay.
The next thing, I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. Also deliver it's nice to be polite in emails. I hope your day's off to a good start, etc. But then when it comes to the actual ask and the purpose that you're reaching out to people, or the thing that you want them to grasp, you want to get to it sooner rather than later. And that's a mistake that a lot of people make.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Okay, lesson 2, humor. Let's hear it.
So this is probably my favorite of the 3. I'm going to start by telling a story. So a few months ago, before everything shut down, my wife started taking a Wednesday evening figure drawing class, which surprised me because that's not something that's particularly interested her. I was enthusiastic and supportive about it. But it just seemed like every week she seemed like she was leaving a little bit earlier and coming home a little bit later. And to tell you the truth, I got suspicious.
Okay.
So one night I decided I'd had it. She came home 2 hours late, said, "Sarah, what's been going on? Like, you've been acting really distracted lately. You have this new group of friends that I haven't met and don't know anything about. You go into the other room to respond to text and you're 2 hours late. Like, is there something that I need to know?" And she said, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. We had an emergency come up at work. I didn't even go to drawing class tonight. I went right into the office. I had to put out a fire before a big client meeting tomorrow. I should have texted or called." So I said, "Oh, okay. So you haven't been like out with your boyfriend or something?" And she said, "Oh, Johnny, of course I haven't been with my boyfriend. If I'd been with my boyfriend, I would have come home with a smile on my face." So the reason I tell that joke isn't for exactly to make people laugh. And I've never told a joke in the Zoomiverse before, so it's kind of weird, but there's
Can't get the feedback from us, right?
That's not the type of joke you would tell in a marketing context, but it has, it's a good case study because it's a good segue into kind of the way that jokes work in our brain. So when you hear a joke, as soon as you hear that a rabbi and a plumber walk into a bar, your prefrontal cortex kicks into high gear.
Mhm.
And so your prefrontal cortex is like the most complex piece of software, or the most complex operating system in the universe. And it, among other things, it helps you to interpret complex social situations and language. But with humor, you know, that kicks into high gear and it starts kicking off messages to other parts of your brain, and there's all this complex stuff taking place, but it doesn't feel like work. Your brain's doing a bunch of work, but it feels like doing cartwheels, you know, like when you're a kid, you don't feel like you're exercising when you're doing cartwheels. And that, so first of all, it engages people. Second of all, if you've ever laughed at a bad joke out of kindness,
Pity.
you know intuitively that laughter is a signal of social acceptance. So what all that, the implication of all that for being memorable and persuasive in your marketing is that, you know, your brain kicks off all these feel-good chemicals that also enhance your short-term memory, and they anchor ideas. So science has shown that if you open up a presentation, or if you're transitioning in a presentation and you get the audience to laugh, then they remember more of what follows, or what
Right.
immediately preceded the joke.
Well, and John, I'm thinking too, you know, I'm wondering, the people watching are probably wondering, well, how do I make jokes in my campaigns or when I'm speaking? And maybe it's not jokes all the time, or maybe you aren't a good joke teller, but, you know, I'm thinking also of posts that I read on social media, or stories I hear during presentations or pitches that have a little bit, if not, you know, flat out joke telling. It's vulnerability. Do you find that that is a core component when it comes to humor? Because, you know, I really appreciate when I hear of people's failures or struggles themselves, rather than coming out completely, you know, pristine all the time. It's sometimes it's that self-deprecating humor that we can share with people. How do you feel about that in terms of people's marketing?
I think that a lot of times being funny isn't about being witty, it's about being courageous, and it's about being honest and acknowledging the elephant in the room.
Got it.
So that can definitely be done very well. You know, there's definitely wrong ways to do self-deprecating humor.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Absolutely. Do you have an example you can share with us?
Yeah, so I have two super short examples. I won't belabor the point, but uh, I wrote I, I wrote a blog for a client a few weeks ago about financing options for home improvement projects.
Mhm.
So super the driest. It was just about the driest possible topic.
Right.
So it was good, thoroughly researched, and as entertaining as you can make a topic like that. But nobody's reading it for entertainment, and nobody's reading it for self-improvement. They're reading it because they want to make more informed decisions about their home financing. So at the end of it, I said, well, let's see. Yeah, so, well, now you know how cash out refinancing works, which will provide lots of entertaining conversation next time you meet up with friends for happy hour. You know, it's
Right.
just acknowledging that, like, yes, this isn't something that you probably read for personal enjoyment, but I hope it's been helpful.
Well, I will, yeah, go ahead. Play this one if you want, this commercial.
And this is a 60-second video. This is a commercial that Zendesk did.
Perfect.
Has your relationship seen any hard times?
Yeah,
I think every business goes through hard times with their customers.
When we first met, his customer service was just awful.
I didn't think I had the time or the resources for it.
I would call.
She would call.
I would email.
I was not very good at listening in those days. I was very overwhelmed.
Oh, so I started complaining. I told my bridge club, my sister Lorraine, and my 41,000 Twitter followers.
That hurt. Very public.
So, what happened?
Well, that's when I got Zendesk for my customer service.
That made it a real relationship.
Zendesk helped me become the business I always wanted to be.
I like it when he gives me the business.
That's great. See, and I would say that's brilliant on the part of, so from my advertising background, that, I used to work at BBDO downtown in Chicago, working on campaigns just like this. And I say kind of, bravo to the creative team that came up with this concept, that storyboarded it, that scripted it, that wrote it, and that produced it. And so these are some of those kinds of messages that are put out that, they are somewhat risky, but if you're getting really at the right audience and you've really done the research, then you can do a lot with these kinds of messages. So why did you choose that one? What can you share with us kind of behind the scenes on that particular spot, that 60-second spot?
Well, it's a business to business company, B2B. So, nobody forgets they need to sound credible in business, but they didn't take that tack with this ad. They took a different route to try to connect, and it's definitely especially in business to business marketing, it's an underutilized tactic. I picked it for that reason, and also it's relatable, it's short, and it doesn't, people are worried about credibility. This certainly doesn't do anything to undermine Zendesk's credibility.
Right. Absolutely. Perfect.
They could have talked about some companies talk about market share as if anyone cares about what your market share is. They care that you can solve their problems, but they could have talked about any number of things. And like when you talk about the number of years of cumulative experience of people at your firm, that's fine. And you should talk about that and the number of states that you've done business in, or whatever Fortune 500 companies that you've worked with. That's something you should talk about. It's just not something that your competitors are credible people, and there's a lot of credible people in the world, and it's just not how you connect with people. I tried to push people away from leading with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a differentiator too, if you can infuse a little bit of the humor to your brand and create that it creates relationship ultimately with your audience. So John, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, and I know you've got one more point to hit on, and I really want to allow our audience to ask a couple of questions. I know a couple of our audience members have really highly technical businesses, and so I want to give them a chance. In fact, if you're listening or watching, go ahead and think up a question, and you can go ahead and enter it into the chat real quick. But John, could you just touch on your third point real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap with the Q&A.
I'll give the ultra distilled version.
Okay.
Okay. Sensory language, sprinkling sensory language into your marketing is another effective way to make what you say more memorable, because there was a groundbreaking study that was published in 2006 where they used advanced brain imaging that showed that just hearing the word cinnamon activates the same part of your brain as actually smelling and tasting it. So that's been replicated.
Wow.
Using language that evokes the senses, smells and textures and sights, colors, just creates, it enriches context, and that makes the message more memorable. So that is something that requires a little bit more wordsmithing or nuance than the other two things that I got into, but it's fun and it's effective. And that's the 30-second version.
There you go. No, I think this is a huge point that I think it's great to have our audience talking and thinking about sensory language, because this is the core of storytelling, is getting at sensory words. And sensory words are words that express how you feel about something, how something, you know, it's all the five senses, right? Look, feel, touch, taste, and smell. So when you actually share, you know, stories that include those words at a real specific level, you know, even if you don't have a product that you can smell or taste or even touch, you can feel something. And so you can talk to people about how they're going to feel, how their heart rate will either, you know, be lower or higher depending on what you're doing, or how you can share with your consumers how they might imagine their life could become if they could feel a certain way about something. So keep it simple, elevate with humor, keep it tasty in terms of messaging for your brand. That's a fantastic wrap of our 3 key points. Thank you for that, John. Does anyone want to pipe in from our audience with any questions? I'll give you guys about 15, 20 seconds to unmute yourself to ask John a quick question right now. And if not, I will throw a couple rapid fire questions at you myself, John. Anyone have any specific questions about how John could assist or what he could be assisting with?
It's Cindy. Hi, John.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I've actually been following John's blog for a while now. I run an equity crowdfunding platform in Brazil. I found it incredibly helpful in terms of the psychological insights that John provides, a great understanding of how the human psychology works. And I pass them on to my CMO, and he finds them helpful. And they've been really helpful in terms of when our team produces marketing materials to use the concepts as judging whether we're on the right track or not, and if we're really going to penetrate our user base and get their attention, or if we're trying to do too much or throw too much information, as John said. So just first wanted to say thanks for that. And then as a question, I wanted to understand your take on what are the main changes, most important adjustments that you see, if any, due to the current COVID-19 crisis and the restrictions that people have, or maybe the changes in their routines, and if that should have if you have any main tips on how we should change our strategies or our marketing due to the change in people's behaviors, the drastic change in people's behaviors. Thanks.
Great question. John, what do you think?
You know, it changes so much, you know, just the way that you connect with people. Like, I prefer face-to-face meetings and stuff, so that's no longer at least temporarily, that's not a thing. And so one sort of advantage is that geography is obviously less relevant. So I have a little bit less of a local focus now. And a lot of companies have moved into that direction. One thing that people miss in their marketing a lot of the time is that you have to make the process very clear and seamless. So when on your website, if you don't have a clear 3 or 4 step process that kind of gives people a picture of this is a beginning, middle, and end,
Yes.
and it makes it a lot easier to take that first step if you've painted that picture for them. So figuring out how to reconfigure that in a space where, at least for the next year to year and a half, we're likely to be a lot more visual or a lot more virtual, is really important. But then I've also really been emphasizing the stuff that will remain the same. You know, there are universals, just the skillful use of language, succinct language and relatable language, and clear calls to action that most companies, frankly, haven't mastered in the first place.
Mhm.
I feel like there are probably a lot of companies out there that are scrambling to adapt their marketing to a more virtual world when they haven't even laid a strong foundation in the first place. And so you really need to have knockout messaging.
That's a great point. You need a great foundation before you can change course or redirect. I think that's very true. There's another thing I was thinking as you were talking, John, about, you know, what is something to be to address or that has changed. And I think there's just a lot of overwhelm that people are experiencing right now with regard to COVID and the pandemic and the ways their lives have had to change. And so one of the pieces, you know, I'm hearing from people I know is how blurry lines have gotten because we have mostly been asked to work at home and kids are home now. It's summer. It's, you know, there's a lot happening. And so those, back to your first point about keeping things simple, we're all holding, I think, a few more bean bags right now. And so, yes, clarity, succinctness, and, you know, memorable stories, short, memorable stories can really make a difference with people when you're communicating with them in any environment, but especially the virtual. If you're not starting virtual calls or pitches with a short anecdote or story, you're probably, you know, not off on the best foot, in my opinion. You know, people want, on a virtual call, they want to know a little bit about you. They want to get into who you are, what your business is, starting with a quick, memorable, personal story of some kind, even where you're from, can completely, you know, change the tone of a call or a meeting. You're trying in that way to create identification with your audience.
Yeah, it's something that establishes common ground, especially, you know, what inspires you that also inspires your client, what's something that frustrates you that also frustrates your client.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And all the things that, everything that mattered 3 months ago matters, or however, everything that mattered a year ago matters all the more now.
Right, exactly.
Fatigue, and they have information overwhelm.
Yep, exactly. Well, John, I got one rapid fire question I'll pose to you, and it's about a book that you might be reading right now. Tell me about a book you're reading now that maybe someone in the audience would benefit from reading at this point, and are you learning kind of something specific that's new to you?
Okay, so I just finished a book last night, and I'm very, very early in another book. I finished a book called Charlie Hernandez and the League of Shadows, which is young adult fiction.
Okay.
And no, I don't always read young adult fiction, but I do read 2 or 3 a year. And what I really like about it is, you know, I'm a nerd. I love literature, but I really admire the way that an author who's maybe 40 years old will so skillfully and like in an emotionally intelligent way take the perspective of his or her readers, you know, who are much younger, and use the language that that is authentic and the kind of language that they would use, and their characters are driven by motives that they understand and that are plausible, and their mannerisms and insecurities and aspirations have to be plausible. And so that's what I really admire about authors across genres, is their ability to do that, to capture that in characters that sometimes they have very little in common with.
Perfect.
So,
Yep. Good audience engagement, obviously, strong writing. Well, a quick thank you to everyone who has joined us today. I want to, I'll definitely share all of your information, John, about how people can get a hold of you if they want to ask further questions, get clarification, learn about your process. And I also just want to let everyone know that I'm running I love John's slide right here. It's making me think of the slide piece that I'm going to be doing next Wednesday. It's a slide savvy webinar. So if you're interested in popping into that, you can shoot me a note as well about details to register. but this is a great looking slide for a number of reasons, and I can tell you all more about that next week. But thanks, John. Is there any last piece that you want to share? What's your email if people want to get a hold of you?
I should have posted it. It's John
Yeah.
at garvingtoncreative.com. And I will also share a summary sheet of 3 points with my contact information too. So when you post this, if that's cool, Cindy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Provide a download link for it, and people will be able to get a hold of me through that.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, John. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Remember to keep it simple. Remember to elevate with humor when you can, and keep it tasty, right? Thank you so much, John. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good morning.
Bye.